In Plato's dialogue, the Phaedrus, the soul is likened to a chariot being driven by two winged horses on its way to a heavenly banquet. But there's a problem. One of the horses, the bad one, is intent upon flying downwards, while the other horse flies upwards. This is our first glimpse of Plato's famous concept of the tripartite soul. And while it's clear that the soul ought to be thought of as a triad, in which, presumably, reason, the charioteer, is forced to wrestle two competing impulses, the explanation of the impulses is far from exhaustive at this point. The analogy, you see, has its limits. The background of the dialogue is a discussion on homoerotic love, and the conversation moves away from giving us a more useful description of the soul. When we reach the point where we have a man and a boy and 4 horses all in bed together, the metaphor has obviously got quite out of hand. We are treated to a more complete picture of Plato's tripartite soul in the Republic, where the soul is divided into 3 parts: the appetitive, the rational, and the spirited. The appetitive is the lowest part, in the sense that it wishes to indulge in bodily sensations. It experiences pain and pleasure, but it is entirely non-rational. The Freudians among you may be reminded of the id in Freud's own tripartite concept of mind. The spirited part is ambitious and desires honour, but its function goes beyond this, providing a supporting role to reason against the impulsive appetites. The overindulgence in pleasures distracts the soul from its true purpose. The rational part ought to rule over the other two, keeping them in check, not allowing the appetitive to run away with its desire fulfillment. This is the part that is associated with knowledge and learning. It represents what is the true purpose of the soul, ultimately contemplation of the forms. What's more, the desire to avoid pains may deter someone from doing what is just and good. Reason, therefore, harnesses the requisite emotions of the high-spirited part, such as anger or temper, to aid its ongoing struggle with the appetites. Mapped onto the analogy of the chariot and the horses, the good horse is the spirited part, attempting to overcome the strength of the bad horse, the appetites, to move the chariot in accordance with the wiser desires of the charioteer of reason. It's interesting what leads Socrates to delineate these parts of the soul. He notes that we have common mental conflicts. You might, for instance, desire an alcoholic beverage, but be unwilling to indulge in your desire, perhaps because of health concerns. This suggests a separateness of appetite and reason. Similarly, our emotions may not align with our desires. You might be disgusted by some of your desires, hence the spirited part must be separate from both. So separate are these parts, in fact, that Plato locates them in different areas of the body. The rational part is located in the head, with the neck forming an isthmus, separating reason from the other parts of the soul. These parts are in turn separated by the diaphragm, with the appetitive sitting below and the spirited sitting between the neck and the diaphragm. This positioning allows the spirited to assist reason in restraining one's earthly desires. One may wonder if this division of the soul is problematic for Plato's argument from affinity that Socrates articulates in the Phaedo. Here, the immortality of the soul is derived from the idea that the soul is not composed of parts, that it shares an incomposite nature with the forms, and so, like the forms, must be eternal. In contrast, we now have Plato stipulating that the soul is indeed composed of parts, which would seem to put it in opposition to the nature of the forms. Perhaps the solution to this problem lies in seeing Plato's tripartite soul not as being composed of 3 separate components, but instead of 3 distinct capacities or powers. For example, the rational part is merely one's capacity to reason. Plato doesn't appear to clear this up, and philosophers of the soul for centuries to come would seek to establish whether the soul is substantially complex, being composed of parts, or simple, no parts. If you'd like to learn more about Plato and the soul, then check out my other videos. For now, thank you for watching, and see you next time.